In this video, I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion and show you the basics when it comes to texturing weapons and high poly objects in your game. Now, this is a little bit more complex than previous videos, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because obviously this same method applies depending on whatever weapon you're making. But I'm just trying to show you the basic process and the basic workflow that is involved in modeling really beautiful looking weapons. Now, in previous videos, you should have had a look at basic texturing, creating UV maps, and having a look at the basic high poly to low poly idea. But to recap that, with any object that you want to apply a material to, a texture to, you need to create a UV map for it. Now, if I were to create a UV map from this object, even obviously this bolter isn't finished yet, but even right now, this UV map would be really complex. You only have to look at this detail here. For me to unwrap all of this and make it into a UV map that would be easy for me to put together would be very time consuming. Also, once I've finished modeling this weapon, I'm probably going to end up with a weapon that's got hundreds of thousands of polys, maybe even more. And again, from an optimization point of view, it's not going to work in our game. We can't have all of our objects beautifully modeled. It doesn't work like that. One, our game engine won't be able to handle it. The frame rate will drop. And two, we just won't be able to UV map it. We just won't be able to do that. Now, I found a really great video which looked at this online, and Edge CGI do some very high-end stuff. And again, they talk through the same process. In this video, you can see that they've modeled a very high poly axe. Okay, and when you zoom in on that, you can see straight away that's obviously these are all edges. So you can imagine how many polys are on here. Look at this. Look at how detailed this axe is. There's no way that could feature in a game. It's just far too detailed. Look at this. You know, this has all been sculpted. So all of this, to get that kind of battered, worn edge, will just be unachievable within a game. All this wooden texture, you just won't be able to have that within your game. You won't be able to UV map it. It's impossible. So what happens is that it goes through a stage of retopology. And remember, from previous units, retopology is about creating a simpler, cleaner base mesh of our high poly sculpt. This is the high poly sculpt. We make a simpler version of it and create a UV map from that. That will be much easier for us to do. And as a result, texturing is easy. We can steal all the detail from this high poly model. So that was the whole point of creating it, is to steal all these shadows and then apply it to a low poly object that's much more optimized and economical for a game, but is also much easier for us to UV map. You can see as he's gone over and retopologized this and created a much more simple version of it, the faces and the number of tries are going to be much lower, much lower, the number of faces. The basics of this is using a tool called QuadDraw. Okay, so in my my Maya file here, if I just take this off and take off QuadDraw, let me just take a few steps back. What I've got then is the start of a high poly sculpt. Okay, I've got an object here. If I just offload surface, there we go. Go to object mode. So I've got, it's not detailed yet, but eventually this will be a really detailed sculpted weapon. And what I would do is create a new base mesh for this. Now, in order to do that, you can use the QuadDraw tool, and that's exactly what it's designed for. So it's almost like you can sketch over this and create a simplified version of it. If I go to layers and just turn off some of my layers here, I'm just going to select all of this and assign it to make it a new layer from the selection. So create a new layer and then add selected objects. So let me just show you this. So there's my first layer, and I'll call this high poly. Okay, hit save, and then I'm going to do a new layer, and on this layer I'm going to create my low poly version of it. So let's say you've got your completed model. It's very, it might be in different parts. These are all in different parts. Doesn't matter, because our new base mesh will all be one object. Again, keeping it easy for us to UV map. And you want to use a tool called Quad Draw. Now, the thing that we need to do is make this all a live surface. So if we just have this selected and go to this up here, click the little magnet button, poly surface 2 is selected. So this is the live surface now. So you can see all of our tools are connected to this surface. And when I draw on this now, it's looking for this surface. So as I drag over here, what's happening is these new vertex points that I'm drawing in are kind of floating on the surface. Now if I hold down Shift and click in the middle of those, it's created a face for me. So let me just show that again. So click and hold. I'm going to come up here, click and hold, and then Shift and click in the area that I want there to be a face, and it will add a face for me. Click up here, click up here, and I can go around my model. Oops, let's just come around and be adding in my faces. I can also, if I hold down Tab, extend these out. So let's say I just want to kind of come out a little bit there. You can see how it's kind of sticking to the surface. Hold down Tab, extend that out and kind of come across there. And maybe I'll extend this up here. You see how it's kind of naturally snapping as well. Let's extend this out. So you can see, look, if I just float it, there you go, it's snapped. So what we're doing essentially is we're creating a new base mesh. Okay, so you can see there, you can see it. We've got another layer. If I just turn this off, and this will be much simpler. It will be much lower in polys. And then once you've finished and you've gone around your entire object and you've kept it very simple and neat, you can then create a UV map for this object and then apply all of your detail and your texturing to that. So that is how we create really high poly weapons, such as the axe in this video that has hundreds of thousands of faces, and the actual final game object is much lower in quality but still looks fantastic. So I just wanted to show you the basic workflow and try and get you to get your head around it in a nutshell, what it is to create objects and models for games. So to summarize, it's creating a really high detailed, amazing weapon or object that we have no worries about how many faces are on that, how detailed it is, doesn't matter. We then create a new base mesh from that using retopology and using the live service and Quad Draw to create a base mesh of that, a simpler version of it. And then we texture bait, we take all the textures from it, create a UV map on the base mesh, and apply all of those same processes that I've shown you with the crate to that base mesh, which gives the impression of a really detailed, high quality weapon without all of the faces. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's kind of given you an idea of what the general workflow is, and you can start to see this in action now. Have a play with the Quad Draw, see if you can get your head around it, and see if you can create different layers for your high poly mesh and your base mesh, which you can then use to texture bake from.